you always known that you're on a soul path? And have you wondered how to gain real insight into the steps along your own unique journey? Welcome everyone, I'm Sarah Main, and thank you for joining me on Damayanti, the show for your soul. It's great to have you join me. Damayanti means deep peace and calm. Damayanti sheds a light for your soul through the gift of wisdom that shines in the beautiful and universal language of Sanskrit. Damayanti is the show that speaks to your soul, connects with your soul, and enriches your soul. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the show. This is Damayanti, the show for your soul, and I'm Sarah Main, your host. And today I want to be talking about the one and only thing over which we have absolute control. The one and only thing over which we have absolute control. Yes, there is something. So it's in Sanskrit, this is called Bhavana. I'm diving straight in, and I'm diving into the Sanskrit because from my point of view, from my background, from my training, the Sanskrit gives you the most accurate, true wisdom knowledge about what's going on. And I was taught this was the one and only thing over which we have absolute control, and this is Bhavana. And Bhavana is a Sanskrit word, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. So let's talk about what is it and why is it so important. So firstly, the only thing we have absolute control over is our attitude. I'll say that again. The only thing we have absolute control over is our attitude. That's our intention. And the way it was described to me when I was learning was our emotional ground. And it's an unusual phrase, but it's actually really accurate. And the Sanskrit will show you why. So our emotional ground. So the Sanskrit word Bhavana, it has several meanings, okay, depending on context. But the key theme here that's relevant for us is it means a place of abode where we dwell. A house can be a home or a mansion, but it's actually a dwelling place. Okay, so Bhavana, one of its essential meanings is a dwelling place. Then one of the other meanings related to that is coming into existence, birth and production. So a birthing place, a point of coming into existence. Okay, so get the picture that's being painted here. And then the other associated meaning is a place where everything grows. Now that's related to a home or a dwelling place, because you think about your home, and excuse me, it's a place where everything grows or anything grows. So you think of a home, it's the place where we rest, where we're nurtured. I mean, that is the ideal for a home. And you know, by and large, that's what we experience. After we're tired, we just want to go home, right? And sleep in our own bed. If you've been traveling for a long time, you just want to get home and sleep in your own bed. It's the place where you rest. It's the place where you have all your belongings, right? So it's the place where anything grows. So an abode, a mansion, a home, a dwelling place, a place of coming into existence, a birth and production, and a place where anything grows. So they're all related, especially if you use the image of the home. And that is one of the key meanings of Bhavana. So Bhavana, note this: abode, home and dwelling, coming into existence, birth, production. It gets that sense of potential and growth, and you know where anything grows. Now note that anything, where anything grows. So emotional ground, it's a really accurate description. Think of a seed planted in that ground, emotional ground. Think of coming into existence, of the seed, fructifying and growing and coming into existence. Think of it growing, think of manifesting, think of being and becoming. Now think of a young child growing and being and becoming who they are as an adult. The seed of it was there in childhood, but they almost leave that childhood behind, who they are as a child, and they manifest, they grow into who they are as an adult. And think of that ground. From that ground, nourishment is derived. We draw the nourishment we need in order to grow. So it's important to spend a little time with the understanding of these words, because words have meaning and words impact and dictate how we think and how we believe, and belief is the driver of action. So we need to examine and get back to this real wisdom, this truth, because then it can guide our thinking and therefore our actions. And by thinking, it's not just cold thinking, it's the mind and the heart together, real thinking, not just cold intellectualization. So bhavana, very important. And if there's one Sanskrit word you learn from me, bhavana, emotional ground, attitude, intention. I've talked about intention before. I've done a whole show on it, in fact. So important. I'm just coming at it now from a different angle, as it were. So coming into existence, birth and production, a place where anything grows, and a home and a dwelling, bhavana. Okay, now note where it says where anything grows. So there's no judgment of whether what's growing is good or bad. The wisdom of Sanskrit doesn't do that. It just gives you the facts. That's why it's true. It really is true, because it accords with how things are. So there's no judgment of whether it's good or bad. This growth, this coming into existence, this birth and production is impartial. It happens impartially. So this is the truth of what happens. So therefore, the responsibility of what is being brought into existence, of what is being brought into existence, of what is being manifested, is up to each of us. That responsibility rests with us. And this takes discernment. So the power of creation will bring it into existence, but the what is being brought into existence, that's up to us. And that's a responsibility that lies particularly with humans, with humanity, with each and every one of us. That's why it's important to know what's happening. That's why we need to know the truth, so that we have the knowledge, and we can be responsible. So this takes discernment. And discernment, which is a natural function of the human being, takes awareness. Because without awareness, without being awake and present, habits will just operate. We operate and we react habitually. We react and operate from habitual, familiar, emotional attitudes, habitual intentions, habitual emotional grounds. And that creates the same outcome in repetition, same old, same old. And that's happening all the time, unless we're awake and aware and discerning and choosing. So the responsibility does rest with us. That's not a bad thing, but that's where the freedom is. This is what we have absolute freedom and absolute control over, is that intention. All right? So bhavana, remember, bhavana is the emotional ground. That's our attitude, is another way of describing it, our intention. Right? But it's very powerful because attitude brings in the emotional side of it, the emotional ground. Think ground where a seed is planted, gets its nourishment, this home, this dwelling place where anything grows, comes into being and existence, draws its nourishment. Okay, so very important to sort of anchor that understanding. So Bhavana is not the end of the situation. It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's the start. It's the place, the ground from which it all manifests. So your Bhavana, your emotional starting point, your emotional ground, it's your intention, your attitude. It's where you start from in any situation. Okay? Whether easy or challenging, that doesn't matter. You start from what your attitude is. What is your intention? What is your emotional ground? We'll talk about that. So how do you become more aware of your emotional intention, your emotional ground, your attitude? All right. So what is my attitude? What am I feeling right now? What is playing on the screen of my emotional ground? What am I feeling and experiencing? What is my emotional response or reaction to this situation? What am I bringing to each situation? From where are my responses or reactions coming from? From where are my responses or reactions coming from? Do I have habitual reactions to certain circumstances? What are they? Are they helping? Is this reaction helping? Does this reaction, does it make the situation better or worse, or is it just neutral? So these are important questions just to help now start opening up the area, raising the awareness, getting some presence on what can be just so habitual and clouded with habit that we don't even stop to think. So according to the wise, once you've established what your emotional ground is, you have total control to maintain it if it's helpful or change it if it isn't. Only you can do that. And it doesn't matter what situation is happening in your life, no matter what, great or not so great, easy or challenging, you have absolute control about your attitude in that situation. You have free will completely. So hear this again. According to the wise, once you've established what your emotional ground is, you have total control to maintain it if it's helpful or change it if it isn't. So in order to become aware of our emotional ground in any situation, we need to become awake and aware and present to how we're feeling, right? Not just this super feelings. That's the place to start. We need to actually get down to the sort of ground level. That's why it's called emotional ground. And these feelings, it's important to note, are not us, but they do propel and motivate us. They control our actions, our words, our behaviors, and our habits. These feelings are not us because we can watch them and we can witness them. And anything we can witness, we can't be that. Fundamentally, it's not us. If we can watch it, it can't fundamentally be us. All right. So I'm going to stop for a break now. And after the break, we're going to pursue this even further. And I've got a wonderful, beautiful story that illustrates the differences in emotional ground and the difference in outcomes. So I'll be back soon. And welcome back to Damayanti, the show for your soul. And today we're talking about the one and only thing over which we have absolute control. And in the first half, I was talking about this is called in Sanskrit, beautiful Sanskrit, Bhavana. And Bhavana is your attitude, your intention, and more precisely, your emotional ground. And the Sanskrit word Bhavana has several meanings, but the ones pertinent to us are it's a dwelling place, an abode, a home, it can be a mansion or a palace. They're all part of that meaning. It's coming into existence, birth, production, so it has that sense of growth, and it's a place where anything grows, Bhavana. And I was always taught it to be emotional ground, which encompasses all those meanings in Sanskrit, that home, that place from which things manifest. So it's that potent. And I was taught we have absolute control over that because we have total free will to choose what our bhavana, the emotional ground in any situation for us is. You can't choose for someone else, but you can for yourself. And to sort of really get that we have that responsibility and that this emotional ground does determine the outcome, because if we act and react, well, if we react from habit, then we're going to get the same outcome. But if we have total control to choose, we have the free will to choose what our attitude, our intention, our emotional ground is in any situation, then no matter what's happening, great or not so great, hard or easy, challenging, harmonious, whatever, we have free will to choose our attitude. And that's a game changer. So change the bhavana, change that emotional ground, change your attitude, you change your life. And remember, what we're feeling is not us. If we can watch and witness it, then we can't fundamentally be it. If it's fundamentally us, we can't observe it. So all these things are playing out within our body, mind, heart, right? And therefore we can't fundamentally, who we are, our very being is watching this, and therefore who we are is not really that. That's an important element because that's why we can change it. And remember that if this emotional ground, this attitude and intention is allowed to run its course unexamined and unchecked, if we leave it to run the show, then the outcome can be chancy. Okay? So with awareness and presence, there is space, note that word space, to choose. The moment we actually become present and aware, there's space, right? And with that choice, with that space, there's choice. And with that choice comes control. And that's where in that space, we can exercise free will. It doesn't always seem like there's free will because we need to actually fall still within and let that space open up, be present and aware and grounded and steady, inwardly still. And then there's space to choose. So rather than being controlled, that birth point, we can call it that. Bhavana is like a birth point. It's always present. It's not, well, you know, it's always been that way. In every moment, there's this opportunity for something fresh. So that's where the free will, the control comes in. All right. So in that space, we have that point to choose, and that choice, and with that choice comes control. So rather than being controlled, all right, we can exercise free will. And that's one of the birthrights of a human being. So there's always the opportunity for a new beginning. No matter how it feels, no matter what's happening, no matter what habits we have, no matter the situation, we always have free will. We always have this opportunity for a new beginning. So that's the good news, and that is the truth. And the Sanskrit supports that. The wisdom traditions support that. Okay, so the key point is not to wait until difficult situations arise to work on this. All right, I'm going to say that again. The key point is not to wait until difficult situations arise to work on this, till you're prompted, till you feel you've got no other option, till your back's in the corner. You're up against a wall and in the corner. You've got nowhere else to go before you start working on this. Start now. Start when it's easy. Start when there doesn't appear to be a reason to work on it. That's when you practice, okay? Think of a key sports person. They train not when they're in the ring or on the sports field or running the marathon. They train when they've got space and time to train, okay? Same thing, all right? There's a spiritual teacher back in the 1970s, 80s called Lester Levinson, really interesting guy. He developed the release technique. And he used to say, release when you're high. And he was talking about releasing all these old emotions and attitudes and intentions and emotional grounds. He didn't use those words, but he said, release when you're high. That means when it's easy and when you're happy. He used the word high, when your energies are higher. Release when you're high. Don't get caught up in feeling great. Feel great and then let that go. Just keep letting it go. You can still enjoy it, but you let go any holding on to it. He said, release when you're high. Don't wait and start thinking, oh, gee, I better release when I'm down in the depths and my energy's low and things aren't so good. He said, always release when you're high. And that's a good little tip. It's saying the same thing of don't wait until the situation's difficult. Start when it's easy. Okay, so we do have habitual emotional states where this is kind of a set point within us. Each one of us has got this in its own form. And this set point's kind of where we default to. And sometimes it's worth putting some light on this, putting some attention and awareness on this set point, because habits can be involved in all of that. And we don't always gain awareness of these so that we can choose something different. We can choose a different attitude, intention, emotional ground. We don't always choose something more elevated when we really need to. So that's a little intro into Bhawana, our intention, our emotional ground. This is the one and only thing we have absolute control over. All right, we have free will as human beings. It is our birthright. But with that comes responsibility, because we want to choose that which is elevated, that which lifts up, that which leads to the light always, and not choose that which promotes lower energy, leads to darkness. We don't want that. Okay, I've got a beautiful story. It's a traditional story, and it illustrates two Bhawana, two different emotional grounds, and it's called Narada and the Two Sages. So Narada, in traditional Indian mythology, was a divine messenger of the gods, and he was a messenger of the Lord Vishnu. And he was on his journey around the world on behalf of Lord Vishnu, and Vishnu asked him to go around the world and check on all Vishnu's devotees, make sure they were going okay, and find out if they had any questions to bring back to Lord Vishnu. Okay, this is a story, right? So the sage comes across, Narada comes across a sage who's been meditating vigorously and intently, and when he meets the sage is a bit gloomy and miserable and bit, hard pressed, but he still nevertheless does the right thing and welcomes Narada and offers hospitality. And Narada says, have you got any questions for the Lord Vishnu that I can take back to the heavenly realm? And the sage says, well, how long do I have to stick at these hard disciplines and meditations? I'm doing them all. I'm doing all the right things. How long? And so Narada agrees to ask Vishnu when he gets back to the heavenly realm. And then Narada continues on, comes across another sage who's devoted to Lord Vishnu. This sage is upbeat and happy, and when he sees Narada, he's delighted. He's over the moon. He's dancing and singing and offering hospitality. And Narada also asks, okay, what questions have you got? And the sage says, well, look, I don't really have any. And so Narada says, well, what do you want me to ask him? And he says, well, how about how long will it take until you get to the heavenly realm? And the sage says, well, look, it's not a pressing question of mine. I'm happy, but if you want to ask that, great, fine. So clearly the sage wasn't fussed. So Narada goes back to the divine realm and returns, puts the questions and comes later and returns. The first sage, he says to the miserable guy, do you want the answer? And the sage says, oh, well, sure, yeah, a bit begrudgingly, okay. And there happens to be a bowl of fruit with pieces of fruit in it, and there were 3 pieces of fruit in the bowl. And Narada says, well, it's going to take as many lifetimes as there are pieces of fruit in the bowl, and there happen to be 3 pieces of fruit. So three lifetimes, basically. And the sage is devastated. It is even more miserable with this answer. So Narada's, okay, so he goes along to the second one, the happy one. And the happy sage says, the happy sage says, hi, and Narada says, do you want the answer? And she says, yeah, sure. And Narada says, well, look, it's bad news. This is bad news. See this tamarind tree, which has got millions of leaves. You're going to have to wait as many lifetimes as there are leaves on this tree. And the sage starts jumping around saying, fantastic, couldn't be happier, totally over the moon. Narada's perplexed and says, hang on a minute, this is actually pretty tough news. The sage says, I've just received news that one day I'll meet my Lord. What wonderful news. I'm so happy. So just as he's explaining this, Narada hears this flapping of wings, and Garuda, the big bird that Vishnu flies on, arrives, and Vishnu has come himself to come and gather up this devotee who is so happy and has such devotion, and he's whisked off to the heavenly realm. So that story illustrates tu bhawana, right? Situation, opportunity, and yet one's happy and one's miserable. One is free and one is bound, even with doing religious devotions. So that story actually has a lot to learn, a lot to get out of it. All right. So I'm going to finish here, and I want you to think about that, because in my next show, I'm going to be pursuing this even further and talking about from darkness to light, how our bhavana can take us from darkness to light, just like those 2 sages who had different attitudes. They were both doing the same thing, worshipping the Lord, but with different attitudes and therefore different outcomes. So thanks for joining me. It's been wonderful to have you here, and I'll see you in the next show. If you want to find out more about Damayanti, the show for your soul, and Damayanti for your soul, go to my website, damayanti.store. That's damayanti.store. There's my show archive. There's beautiful jewelry to purchase with Sanskrit mantras on them. So powerful and beautiful to have as a personal energetic reminder. So go to my website, damayanti.store. Thank you for spending time with me on Damayanti, the show for your soul. To find out more about Damayanti, or to get my book, Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success, or to purchase my range of beautiful spiritual jewelry, go to my website, damayanti.store. That's damayanti.store. See you next time.